Hello. We're here today with Tracy Osborn of Wedding Lovely and Hello Web App. I'll let her talk about Wedding Lovely a little bit. Hello Web App is a book to help you do the development side of launching an app and doing some of the logistical things in there. So, hello, Tracy. Welcome.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. I guess the way to start out would be let's give me a little background on your career trajectory and arc, what led to Wedding Lovely, and then kind of talk a little bit about what Wedding Lovely is, and then we'll dive into all the really, really fun stuff.
Ha. Okay, cool. I have an art degree, so I went through school for graphic design. I touched a little bit into computer science, and I was like, ugh. And so I went to art, and I thought that I wasn't going to touch the programming side of things. And then I kind of gradually fell back into programming because after school, I started work at a startup that was doing SEO stuff and worked with them for 4.5 years, starting from a garage into an office. And that was really cool to work at this small startup because it taught me a lot about kind of teaching myself. There was only 13 people at this startup. And after 4.5 years, I was kind of like, well, I've learned a lot from working at this startup and from being with these people. But I'm in the Bay Area. This was a startup. It's kind of getting a little tiring after 4.5 years. So, what if I started my own startup, as you do when you're living in Silicon Valley? Everyone, their mother has a startup. So then there was a summer of doing some freelancing, and I played briefly with trying to find a co-founder because as I had an art degree and I didn't know programming. I was like, oh, I need to go find my technical co-founder. And that lasted about 3 months. I actually got a Y Combinator interview with this person. But like the day before that interview, things exploded. And I was like, oh, this is why you don't get co-founders from the internet. You actually aren't like compatible in that period of time. So long story short, at that point, I decided to jump into programming, taught myself Python, and I launched a directory of wedding invitation designers. So this is really how Wedding Lovely started, not because, I wanted weddings, but it was me as a graphic designer wanting to support other graphic designers, people who are working with wedding invitations and wanted to have a place, something that was easy for me to program, which is a directory, make a place for people to find graphic designers to help them design their wedding invitations. I thought that would be a cool niche. So that's where the whole wedding thing started. And when this directory started taking off, I was like, well, I could just clone that directory and make one for planners. And I can clone that directory and make one for photographers. And that went for I did 8 clones. These were not under one code base, which is, looking back on it, I'm like, wow, that was really terrible. Because when I did something new, I'd copy paste it between each of these project clones. And then so this was, Wedding Lovely has been 8 years ago. So this is early times. Now those clones have merged into one general vendor directory. Those individual websites still exist. WeddingInviteLove.com is still a place for people to find wedding invitation designers. But there's also one site that combines everything into one big vendor directory. And then the other side of the business now is there's a wedding planning app that I built to help shuttle people, help them plan their wedding in a more sustainable fashion. I wanted to have a place where I'm like, hey, ignore all the traditions and all this BS really that's in the wedding industry. Use my planning app where I'm trying to be very real and down to earth and friendly with it. And then it also helps support the small businesses that we work with since they're included in the app as well.
Okay. And so
it's kind of monster.
Yep. No, that's awesome. Well, and I love the progression on development. And I think one of the things that I love hearing is, so with programming, there's so much people want to put people down, and you see all that, and it's like you don't want to go to Stack Overflow or ask questions. But to me, I love how naive we all are when we're getting started, and it's like, oh, I can just do this. And more often than not, if you just start and kind of do it, things take shape. Even if it's painful and messy and wrong, eventually you figure it out. But it's if you know too much, you're like, oh, I could never pull this off. Whereas if you don't know as much and you're learning as you go, you kind of have the courage to be like, yeah, what the heck?
Yeah, definitely. I taught myself how to code while building this. Every time I had feature, like, oh crap, I have to go figure out how to code that feature. So then I would go and figure that out and be like, oh wow. And then it take what I learned and look at my old code and be like, oh crap. And then I go fix that. And it's just been this iterative process. There's still things in there that are terrible, but it works.
Yeah.
So when I try to teach people how to code through a Hello Web app, a lot of it's like, sometimes at workshops, I'll actually show the code base for Wedding Lovely, because even to people who don't program, they can look at it and they can see things that are, that's things are being repeated. Things are super wordy. They can see that it's awful, but I'm like, hey, and yet I've been running this for 8 years. So you can code something and it won't look beautiful, but if it works, that's all you really need to do. That's the only thing you need to do in order to launch something and start working on it. Just see if it works.
There's never really time to improve it, but you have, with most of these apps, an eternity of, with Sifter, like there was always time. And so, every now and then, if I needed a break, I'd circle back and fix something that I hated. Yeah. And, every
creative
now and then, it slows you down, but like in a way it feels better and it's reassuring. It's like, all right, I cleaned that up. And then it enables better features down the road and that kind of thing. So sometimes it's okay to get a little sloppy, I guess, in the beginning. I think the biggest challenge is just when you're getting sloppy and you don't realize it's sloppy. Yeah. But it's another thing when you know what you're getting yourself into and you go, you know what, I'll make this trade-off now and I'll circle back when I'm, when I need to.
One thing that helped is that I had friends that were news about security issues. So I was like, okay, I know my code is horrible, but just make sure I'm not introducing some vulnerability. And there were a few like really stupid things back in the beginning of the app. And my friends were like, oh, hey, you need to change that. Otherwise people can, delete other people's objects willy-nilly. I'm like, oh, learning experience. So as long as I got, having people I can be like, hey, I don't know anything, just please check it for security issues, actually was really helpful.
I would say that's probably the biggest thing, I think, getting started is not being aware of that kind of stuff. And that's hard because there are people that dedicate their whole careers to doing that and know the ins and outs. And that's certainly a challenge. So it's not traditional SaaS. You're not charging subscriptions, but it's providing a healthy income. And you mentioned that it started out as being paid originally and you drifted away from that. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So the way Wedding Lovely makes money, a couple different buckets. The primary way is by selling premium accounts to the small businesses that are on Wedding Lovely. So they can opt in. I call it the Certified Lovely Vendor program. So it sounds all lovely and sparkly. And it's essentially a review process where me and the people I work with review people's applications, give them a stamp of approval, and then they float to the top of the search results and all that. So that's how we make the majority of the money. There's also affiliate links through our blog and sponsored posts and whatnot through our blog. And then I always, wanted to monetize every part of the process, as you naturally do, like, get revenue coming in from multiple sources. So when the planning app started, it was like no brainer. We're going to charge for this wedding planning app that we launched. And I believe the pricing was $8 per month or a $70 or maybe $79 flat fee. And it was a paid product for about a year. And it was a very interesting period of time. Also, the app was a little bit different, is that the app was help you plan your wedding and also build in a wedding website. And the wedding website was actually the most popular feature for people planning their wedding, because they're using this planning guide, but they really wanted that wedding website, which also blew my support requests through the roof, because people who have a wedding website, and there's they can change fonts, they can change colors, but then it's they're emailing me saying, oh, can I add sparkles? Oh, I want to have extra images on my homepage. And then every single person wanted something completely custom. And I started doing that, and it just got overwhelming, because at the time, this was just me working on it. I think I had maybe a couple people, part-timers, but I was the only full-time person. And the other part about the planning app is that people were like, when you're in the wedding industry, there's so much free information out there, because wedding blogs are such a huge thing and wedding magazines are so big. And you're competing with people who have kind of became brand names in weddings. And you're trying to attract people who are just planning their wedding. And first thing you do is you start searching for wedding blogs. You go to these big brand names and they have their own free advice. And if I got people onto Wedding Lovely and I said, hey, this is everything you need to track and plan your wedding, has all this great advice. Your life will be simpler, but it's $8 a month. People spending, $35,000 on our wedding. We're like, why would I pay $8 a month for your thing when I could just be looking at this free advice out there? The thing with weddings is that people aren't looking to save time. They're like, a lot of people want to jump into weddings and build an app because they're like, oh my God, I'm going to save someone so much time with my planning app. But people don't want to save time. They want to have this reassurance that they're planning their wedding like the best way possible. They enjoy that time spent on planning their wedding. And if it takes more time to go out and read all these free articles, these really good free articles and free advice and free planners out there, why would they pay for an app? So that was when I talked to customers about why they would cancel or talk to people why they didn't show up. This was constantly that thing I kept running up against was, I can just spend more time by using free resources. So why would I pay for your app?
Yeah, so it's a combination of every market, every audience, and their needs. They aren't always rational or predictable, and especially with consumers, it's just difficult. Even though they're in a mindset of spending money, it's not. This isn't money that's going to show up at their wedding.
Yeah, and there's a psychological thing where when you say, I'm going to save money by not spending money on that app, but they're still spending, $10,000 on a venue. But hey, at least they save money this other place. You have to get over that urge to try to save money in these small areas because it makes them feel better overall.
So you talked about support a little bit. How much time at that point were you spending on support versus, I guess it sounds like that's probably not a feature you're offering anymore. And
yeah.
So how has that changed support and the time and the investment you have to spend on that front?
Yeah. So the app was making money, and people were using the wedding website, and I was getting a lot of people saying how much they loved my wedding website feature I built into there. But that support was just murdering me. And before, with my customers being businesses, I don't want to go into cliches about the whole bride and groom people being bitchy versus businesses. But I mean, really, they're a harder customer to please and talk to because, the process of planning a wedding is very stressful. And then talking to small businesses, support requests were way better because small businesses are naturally a little more understanding where I'm like, hey, things screwed up. I did this. And people are like, oh yeah, that's totally fine. Like it's a different dialogue between businesses. It's a lot more friendly. I like it a lot more. Just saves my mentality. So the support requests for the brides and grooms were kind of driving me up a wall and spending a lot of time. So I made a decision that I valued these businesses. I thought these businesses would be better for me to work on long term. If I was a VC, I have VC money, but I didn't end up raising anything more. So it was moved back to bootstrapping. If I had a 32-person team under me, I could totally handle the support requests and build the product that people want me to build. Yeah. But if it was going to be just me and maybe a couple part-time people under me, then I needed to put the business in a sustainable place, which was working with businesses only and cut out these support requests. So I ended up, and then by making the planning app free, I would also maximize the amount of people using the planning app and then moving on to working with those businesses I work with. So it give a better value to those businesses. So I ended up ripping out the wedding website, and it was odd. It was hard to code this again, which was like, okay, all people after this date get access to these features, and all these people after this date, all these features have to disappear. But I set it up so the wedding website part didn't exist anymore. I did a partnership with another wedding website company saying, okay, hey, you get a discount on wedding websites to this company, but we're not offering this anymore. Previous people will be supported. Made the app free and decided to just cut off that chunk of revenue. But overall, made my life so much simpler. And, long term, people don't remember that it was paid anymore.
Well, in hindsight, I'm sure looking back on that, it's such an obvious, easy decision. I'm guessing it probably wasn't as easy of a decision in the moment to make such a shift like that. Did you debate that for a while, or does it just kind of?
Honestly, I actually think I just rage quit. So it wasn't that hard of a question. It was just kind of things were building up for a while. Also, when I was building the planning app, I was trying to fundraise. And so having this stars and rosy view of, oh, we're going to make so much money on this planning app. And here's where it could evolve. I pushed it really hard, and then we didn't raise. So then I went back to that bootstrapping model, and then it was just like, I'm done with this. And I think this is like a period. There's been periods of time of working on this, because over 8 years where I've gone very frustrated. And I think that was a period where I was just like, you know what, flipping the table, changing the way this is working. Going back to the small business part of the company largely runs itself. So maybe around this time is also when I started working on Hello Web App. I don't quite remember when that came in, but the books came about a time of my life I needed to have something else positive to focus on, because I was getting really frustrated by the way that Wedding Lovely was going.
So in terms of hours a day, what would you say it was before versus now on support?
Oh, interesting. I hesitate to say this because it's probably not going to sound like that much. It's probably only like 3 hours of emails in the morning. But, when I have to do, yeah, marketing and sales and also design and development, it was just kind of like, this is ridiculous. I don't enjoy this.
Yeah. Okay. And so that was before, or that's current?
The support, that was before, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, now it's kind of weird because one of the best decisions I ever made for running Wedding Lovely is I hired a virtual assistant, which just sounds so Tim Ferriss for our work week. But I actually hired a Philippines-based virtual assistant who does support for the businesses that I work with now. And so I don't touch support, which is like, oh my gosh, it's so much better. Life is so much easier. Because most of these support requests are just the same thing over and over. It's like, oh, what's my password? Like, well, how do I change my username? I can't figure out how to add an image. And I was like, even though I had canned responses for each one of these scenarios.
It's a distraction.
Yeah, just having someone else. I'm like, here's the canned responses. You deal with them. I should have hired this virtual assistant 5 years ago. She's been working for me full time for about a year, paying her $500 a month. As far as I can tell, she's super happy about working with me. I love working with her. Oh my gosh, like hire a virtual assistant.
Yeah, no, that's something I regretted with Sifter. And it wasn't so much the volume of support requests. For me, I was always afraid, like they're moderately technical, right? And you're just developers and, it was a struggle. I was like, well, how am I going to find somebody who understands their context? And so that was my fear, was I couldn't just hire virtual assistant. I had to hire somebody who knows development.
Right.
And that it would be much more difficult because by the time and have that experience, the last thing you want to do is be a support person. So
yeah, but
it can be such a distraction. Just the intermittent kind of interruptions, or so it's definitely hard to juggle that, and it takes away from the time that you should be spending.
So it's funny is that the intermittent distractions, I have a new I wouldn't call it an issue, but so I have my virtual assistant. I have another part-time person that's been working with me for like 6 years in Washington, and then I just hired a old part-time employee that had to leave because she needed full-time and I couldn't afford it. This is like 2 years ago. And then she messaged me in January being like, I want to come back even if it's part-time. And I'm like, well, we still can't afford full-time, but how about I'm actually not paying myself for Wedding Lovely right now. I took what I was paying myself and I'm shuttling to her. And because I'm in the middle of writing another book, and I was, again, going through that period of being burnt out. And I'm like, here, you run the company and I'll help you. So her and then my two other assistants are kind of running Wedding Lovely for me right now. But it still means like throughout the day, I get them pinging me, being like, we don't understand how to deal with this solution. Like it's getting better since January, but it's still, now I'm like struggling with like internal company support. I've never had a team under me like this before. So I've been learning a lot about, oh wait, now I have to manage and I'm not being paid for it, but that's okay because I love my little product and it's surviving by doing this.
As the companies evolve, the problems don't go away; they just change.
Yeah,
I think is all it is.
I've been kind of trying to right now. This last month has been trying to encourage my right hand woman. I'm like, you can make more decisions on your own without asking me. I trust you, and it's just getting over that little hump.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a transition, and I think it's easy. I was scared of that transition. I was like, I don't have time to hire somebody to help me. And the thing is, you almost don't have time not to but
Yeah.
it's still a scary kind of how would it work? But everybody I've talked to who's done it has always said really, really good things. So
Yeah, and it's cool when I see the email thread between the three of them. There's a problem, and they start solving without me, and I'm like, oh, it's so awesome! Like I can spend more time on my book looking at this, like, and then problems are being solved, and I'm watching other people work on them. It's actually this really cool feeling.
yeah. So then now, I guess now you're kind of shifting away from it. How does your time break down now versus, or I guess really just, I guess before you did that and then now, how are you splitting up your time? Is it purely focused on the book? Are you mixing in with other things? How's it?
Yeah, like every morning, it's always probably about an email, like an hour of working on emails, usually through Wedding Lovely and answering questions for my team. Writing is really hard for me. So like yesterday, I got nothing done. I guess I got some things done, but like, I wish I could be like, yeah, every day is like 2 hours of emails and then 6 hours of straight writing. Yeah, but I was kind of just walking in circles around my apartment, not doing anything. Mostly new, like whenever there's like political news going on, I just can't focus. And so like today is probably gonna be another bad day for me, regardless of that. Hard. Yeah. So now I'm trying to spend more of my time. I'm trying to get this. One of the reasons why I've like, okay, I need to stop focusing on Wedding Lovely because it's going fine on its own is because I have this idea for this book, this design book. I've been talking it up for like 2 years and I just was not releasing it. I kept doing this conference talk being like, oh yeah, I have this book upcoming. And people were like, that sounds awesome. And then like half a year later, I'm like, still haven't started working on it. So I'm trying to force myself to get the first draft is finished. I have an editor now. Hopefully by summer it is out. And then I'll probably move into, supporting these books and helping sell them, but jumping back into Wedding Lovely more and continue working on it in design and development. Like right now, no major features are being worked on, but I have this gigantic list of things that I want to build. Okay. So probably when this book is out and I can focus on it, I'm going to jump back over, probably not be paid for it, but I don't know. I want to see it succeed. So I'll just continue building on it.
It's funny that you talk about that and like not getting paid. I mean, I'm presumably if you were just doing it full time by yourself, you would be deriving a full-time income.
Yeah.
Safe to say.
Yeah, this year, since I fired myself, Wedding Lovely is doing way better. I've never been like a full-time salary that I could get as a developer or even as a designer. I would never have gotten that in previous years. One of the reasons why Pillow Web App was good because it brought in income. I also had the really lucky deal when I was in San Jose where, like, this sounds really lucky. There was a long story where I had no rent in San Jose. So I was able to focus on building these things while I had to worry about spending out, $1,500 a month on rent. I now live in Toronto. I have rent again. But I was lucky that I was able to work off a very low salary to just futz on this, play with it, and get it going. Wedding Lovely now, I could actually make a good salary if I showed a lot of the money to me.
Yeah.
So I probably would pay myself a little bit, make sure there's no profit at the end of the year to play that game.
Everybody glorifies it, says, oh, you have your own business, you must be so successful. And like so many of the businesses, like the thing is you're just shuffling the money back into the business to grow it. I don't think I paid myself what could arguably considered market rate until about 6 years in. And so, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's neat. Theoretically, I could pay myself more, but like you want to grow the business and invest in the business. And so
it's also, if you can pay yourself less and have freedom to, mid-afternoon, go to the market rather than being stuck at a desk. Like I much rather work for myself at a much lower salary than have a full-time job. I played with that last summer. I got a full-time job, and 4 months after working at this job, I was laid off because they have budget issues. But I was very happy to be laid off. And I was like, okay, full-time job, as much as I had a great salary, and that was awesome. But when the day I got laid off was like the happiest day. I was like, cool, I don't have to worry about that anymore. I like working for myself. I like making my own hours. I like working on this app. I like seeing it grow and see people use it. Even and a runaway success. Like anyone looking at Wedding Lovely, I'm sure could have a billion ideas of like, why aren't you doing this? Like it would be so simple if you did something else. I have a really loosey-goosey feel about it, and kind of as long as I'm happy working on it, I'm not going to stress out too much about what I'm not doing or how much bigger it could be.
Yeah. No, that's huge. I think a lot of people too get carried away thinking that they're going to launch something that's going to take off and they're just going to sit back and cash checks. And
Yeah.
but everybody I talk to, like it is almost never. Every now and then it happens like that. But even some
Yeah.
of those stories, there was 2 years before they took off where it was really, really painful. So
Yeah, you can't count on it. I try to, again with Hello Web App, I'm trying to teach people how to. My goal was to help people build web apps because I really enjoy the process of building this web app, and the actual process to get it launched was pretty simple. And I was like, well, I might as well just write a book on this because it was pretty simple, and I can put it into a very tiny book. And at the end of the book, people will have a web app. Like they won't know how to code, which is fine in my opinion, because like I said, I learned how to code by building my app. So I figured I can teach people how to build their own app. They can teach themselves to code by building something real. I think it'll stick better. At least it did for me. But also try to I also do a conference talk called Marketing for Developers. And one of the big things is like, you got to do marketing because a lot of people are like, how do I go viral? Or like, what will happen when people see my app? And I'm like, you're not going to go viral. People aren't going to see what you build. So then there's this whole other process of you can build a web app, but now what? How do you get people to see it?
And as developers, none of us want to do the marketing
No.
at all, right? We just want to build the web app.
Yeah. And then just like sit back, wait for the money to come in.
Yeah. Marketing is definitely, I feel like that's the one undervalued skill for designers, even too, designers and developers building. Everybody thinks, oh, well, if I just build a good product, then I don't have to market. And I think it was, I don't know if it was Steve Jobs or whoever, but it was marketing is the price you pay for the tax you pay for developing or building a bad product.
Oh, yeah. That's
right?
a good one. I should keep that.
So, but then everybody thinks, oh, well, if I just build a good product, then I don't have to market. And it's like, but even Apple is marketing.
I was having an argument yesterday with someone about how simple it would be to launch something in the wedding industry. And I was like, well, how are you going to get customers? Because if you build something in weddings, you have to get customers, new customers, whole new set of new customers, pretty much year after year after year, which is what kills wedding apps. And he's like, well, it'd be word of mouth. People who use my app are going to love it and they're going to tell other people, and I'm just going to grow from word of mouth. I'm like, no, you're not. Like people also in weddings, I was like PTSD after a wedding is done. Like no one wants to talk about how they did their wedding, what apps they use, and share that information with their friends and family because they don't want to think about it anymore. Like word of mouth is not going to happen. Yeah.
So moving on to some of the more challenging things, I've got a few questions along these lines. What's been the toughest day that you've encountered with the business, and kind of how'd you get through? What was the day, and then how'd you get through it? So
Wedding Lovely launched in 2010. 2011, I went through a 500 startups incubator program. So they offered to fund me, and I was doing bootstrap business, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to switch it over to a VC business. So I went through 500 startups, and then a very, very awesome person was like, I want to be your co-founder. And I was like, boom, I am doing things right. And then Etsy came to me offering went to do the acquiring process. And I was just like on top of the world. Like I just went through 500 startups. I have a new, amazing co-founder. I'm going to Etsy, being flown to Etsy and staying in this really fancy hotel and meeting all the heads of Etsy. And I got the offer from Etsy. And this is where things just started going downhill because the offer from Etsy, all of my advisors, like doing this acquisition process, of course, I went to other people being like, you've been acquired, please help me. Put my advisor, and all the advisors were like, that is a shit offer. And there's no way you should take it. So I turned down Etsy's offer, tried to negotiate. They were just like, nope, bye. And then my co-founder and I were like, let's try to build this business. But like 4 months later, she sat down and was like, no, I'm out. I have a new job. I'm starting tomorrow, which was really shitty. So that was like the lowest absolute positive point where I screwed up this momentum after demo day by pursuing this acquisition. So I didn't fundraise immediately after demo day, which is where momentum is. Turned down the acquisition. And then this person who was supposed to be my partner after, I think she was at Wedding Lovely less than a year, wasn't like, hey, we're having problems. Let's talk about this. It was literally like, I have a new job. I'm leaving. Like, this is my last day.
Yeah.
So much depression. Like, I don't think I did anything for the following month. I had already laid off the employee that we had due to budget issues. And so it was just me. She left. It was just me. And, you know, I was lucky that Wedding Lovely was working at these businesses and that it kind of ran itself because I don't know what I did. I don't even remember. It was terrible. I think it was during December. So maybe I just like got distracted with family and just ran off. And I think it was only a few months later where I was like, okay, maybe I'll actually start adding more features and working on this again. It was a really tough period to have this person that was supposed to partner with me and said, I believe in you, just to be like, I don't believe you in what you're doing at all. Yeah, that was
no,
like,
that's the situation where it would be so easy to just give up.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny looking back on that. And I'm like, I could have just really easily shut down and started on something. But it was throwing me money. I still was being paid from it. I think my salary was $20K, so not that much. But again, I didn't have rent. So I was like, well, I might as well just go do whatever I did during that time and just enjoy having, an extra $500 every couple of weeks to keep things afloat. Yeah, I could have shut down. And a lot of times I'm like, wow, if I shut down this 4 years ago, who knows what my life would have been? I could have started joined another startup as a designer. I could have started another thing. I have so many ideas I've wanted to build that I haven't built yet. But, in hindsight, it's always 2020.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Mm-hmm. So have there been plateaus in growth that you've had to break through? And if so, kind of how did you break through them? Was it a certain strategy? Was it just time and tenacity?
Yeah, it's always been growing slow, even during the excited points where we had like VC funding and all this other stuff. And that's one of the things that's always been hard for me because like every time I look at the growth graph, I'm like, oh, we're just at that moment where it's going to go that rocket ship. And that rocket ship, it's always just been like this constant, steady, like uphill slog. And then the other problem is like with working at these businesses and doing this marketplace, when I'm saying, hey, I'm going to help you find your vendor. When I first launched that first directory, it was 10 people on it. So it's useless. And so with the marketplace where it's like, oh, okay, we just hit 8,000 vendors. Now it's really useful to people. Now it'll take off. So a lot of it was me saying, okay, I don't have this explosive growth, but I also don't have the number of vendors in the directory that would support the support. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm just fooling myself, but it was this constant, like, it's okay. Like maybe it'll happen. Later on. So in terms of plateaus, I guess plateaus really have been just mental plateaus for me. Going through these like periods of depression where things didn't go too well. And then somehow being like, okay, cool, I'm going to start working on this again. And then vendors, every time I think about quitting, vendors send me a really nice email talking about how awesome it is. Yeah. Which is like totally like, oh, okay, cool. I'm going to continue working on this a little bit more.
That's a really key point, I think, because when you're running a business or really doing anything, the only people you hear from are the people who are almost satisfied. Because the people who are completely not satisfied don't care and aren't going to take the time. And the people who are satisfied aren't going to bother, or they're going to, email you and make a request. Nobody ever, not nobody, but 1 in 50 will email you and tell you, this is really great. It solved all my problems. And so you just don't hear from them because they're happy and they're focused on doing their thing, which makes sense. But as a business owner, it's so hard to force yourself to remember that and to say, you know what, there are people using this and paying for it and appreciating it and getting value out of it because you don't hear from them.
Yeah, one of the best things I've ever did actually was changing my autoresponder emails. When a business signs up for Wedding Lovely, they get opted into, a MailChimp autoresponder, like, every, 1 week, 2 weeks, 6 months, etc. And I switched them over from HTML, very newslettery looking emails to things that look like personal letters from me. Mm-hmm. And that has like the amount of people that respond to those, even just to say, oh, thanks for the information, has gone way up, which has been so great for like mental, like feeling like you're doing something awesome by having these like these random little responses. Like I am so happy that I switched it over to these plain text, very like, hey, by the way, did you know you can add another image? I know a lot of other product people have been talking about that, and I'm just going to jump on that pile and say, like, don't use HTML emails. Just write something that looks like it's a human.
I did the same for Swift. I did it with just one email, though. And originally I sent it out by hand, and
Yeah.
The eventually it got to the point where I automated it. It was still plain text, but generally, and this was I was way on top of it. Like I would reply within 5 minutes to that email. And there was even one time where somebody asked me, they're like, "Is this automated?" And I replied back, "Nope. It's real. There's a human on the other end." And then
Hmm.
like he kept poking and testing because he thought it was like this whole
A really, really smart
yeah,
automation.
really. And I'm like, "No, this is legit. Like, what can I do to prove it to you?" And he's like, "Wow." He's like, "That's really fast." Like, because it was too fast. He didn't believe it could be real. So, anyways, yeah,
Yeah.
I had that same response, and that it to me, the whole goal was just to create an interaction and make it so people realized that I was approachable and they could ask for things and request features and share ideas and whatever.
Yeah. It
And
took
that
me
really helped.
a long time to move off of Gmail for everything. There's this new app, and I'm not being paid by them. I just started using them. It's called Front, and it's the first like support software that doesn't like not first, probably other ones, but it's the first one I've used that didn't make it obvious that it like responses were coming from a support software.
Hmm.
So I was able to set up like all of our random emails, like hi at and
Yep.
like hello at, so that the virtual assistant and then the two other, I call them minions lovingly, two other minions I work with, like you can see when someone's going to respond for something, but when they respond, it's not like that dot 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 respond above this line or
Yeah.
something that looks really fake. I used Gmail and just used filters, and we all kind of coordinate for so long because I wanted to have it
Yeah.
look like, hey, we are actually responding to your email. We're not some, you know, I say like we're not some foreigners in a different country. Except again, my virtual assistant is in the Philippines, but she's amazing, and awesome person, and not some random support staff I've hired. She's a full member of Wedding Lovely. But it looks like this app is a lot of money, but it's the first like support app I've used that has that
Yeah.
real email feel.
Help Scout works that same way.
Mhm.
That's what I used with Sifter, and that was the selling point for me. It was the same thing. It
Yeah.
was like it was a human app. It didn't feel like, you know.
Yeah, there's so many out there. Like so many support apps out there that don't do that. And it's like when you get that email back, it's like respond above this line. It's like, oh
There's nothing I dread more than
yeah,
getting a response from Zendesk as a customer of
yeah,
a company, and then it's from Zendesk, and I'm like, crap. Like
yeah. I'm just
this is going to get
talking to a
lost. They're
robot.
not going to care.
Yeah.
It immediately sours and scares me away.
Yeah, that was one of the things that was really important for me for Wedding Lovely is because there's so many wedding businesses out there that are very faceless.
Well, they
That
have to be, right? If you're
yeah,
doing consumer stuff, you can't scale
yeah,
by, hand-holding everybody. So,
yeah. So I wanted like I use a lot of like smiley faces. And it's like actually in our brand guidelines internally. That's like smiley faces and exclamation points. And we're gonna like when we make a mistake, it's gonna be like, hey, we screwed up, and it's gonna be human. And so the businesses I work with and consumers are both like, oh, you can actually talk to a real person. Actually, there's like in the planning app, I have this little box that says, if you have any questions about venue, send it in and we'll reach out to our business partners. And very few people use it. It's I need to I hope more people use it. It would increase my amount of support I get. But it's always fun when someone's like, hey, I'm trying to decide between these two venues. And I have these vendors I work with, so I could message them in the area. I'm like, hey, what's your opinion between these two venues? And they respond back, and I send that feedback over to the
nice.
to the consumer, and they're like, this is amazing. And then the businesses are like, this is really cool. We interacted with Wedding Lovely, and it increases their appreciation for my company. And it's like this win-win-win process. I need to get more people using that. But that whole like acting like a human, helping people plan their wedding has been really important to me.
And I think a lot of people too are almost scared of being too tiny, right? They're afraid that people won't trust them if it's a small business. And I think the reality is, like, if we all think about it, we enjoy interacting with small businesses because, I guess with technology, there's some fear there and trepidation because if you're too small, like, how can you be doing things right? But in general, for support and that kind of thing, to know that you can talk directly with the team running it, there's a connection there that you can't replicate and the big companies can't compete with. And there's a lot of people that certainly appreciate that. So it's not a bad thing to reveal, like, we're not some huge faceless corporation.
Yeah, it's funny. I just did a big update to the back end of Wedding Lovely, and I sent a message out to all my customers like, hey, I did this huge update. You can't see anything because it's all in the back end. But I was like, hey, but some things might be acting wonky because I might not have found all the bugs. And there were bugs, and they would email me and be like, hey, this isn't working. And I'm like, hi, if I haven't talked to them before, I'm like, hi, I'm the founder of Wedding Lovely. I also coded this, so it's my fault. But I'm working on it. And they're like, oh, that's funny. Being able to say like, hey, I'm the one who actually built this, and I'm sorry because I broke it.
People are incredibly understanding.
Yeah.
So we kind of running a little long, but I've got a couple more, and really they kind of go hand in hand. But if you could go back in time and tell yourself one thing before, at the very, very beginning of all of this, and know that you would listen to yourself, whether it's something like watch out for this or go invest time to learn this, be prepared for this, what would that be?
I love Etsy, and that acquisition process was really fun to go through, but that was like the turning point for my company, as I mentioned before. And I would be like, when it comes to acquisitions, like it's super cool when someone as awesome as Etsy comes to your company and says, hey, we're interested in maybe buying you. And it's like, boom, oh my God, amazing. If I was able to upfront be like, also, I can't accept anything lower than this, would have saved me so much time, and that momentum my company wouldn't have dropped. Like I always look back at that moment of just feeling like, oh my God, this is it. I'm going to be acquired by Etsy, and not really thinking about what would happen if we weren't. Mm-hmm. I think I wish I was more suspicious. I wish it would be nice not going through the process, but at least just being upfront about making sure expectations under the right level would have changed probably the entire direction of this company. That would be one. And the other one would be, I talked about it at MicroConf last year, where I launched Wedding Lovely as a bootstrap business. I'm like, yeah, and I started making money. Like I put in paying features pretty early on. But if you want to build a business that's VC backed, it's a lot better we don't have money, because then they can't like point at any numbers and be like, well, why aren't you making more? When you're not making money yet, it's like sky's the limit, and it's like all is imagination. So I went bootstrapping, and then I went through 500 startups, raised VC, and then I went back to bootstrapping. And then later on, investor came to me being like, I believe in you. Here's a $20,000 check. And I was like, oh, and I got stars in my eyes again. And I took it, and I'm like, I'm going to fundraise again, which 4 years after our company starts is a terrible time to fundraise, because A, I had numbers that people can point at. And then B, it's like, if you're not successful in 4 years, why would you be now? Yeah. So that fundraising kind of failed. I kept that $20,000, and she's an investor with me, but I know she's disappointed in me. So that flip-flopping, like when you start a business, you can like flip-flop once, but don't go back and forth, because every time I switched, like the way you build a bootstrap business versus a VC business are so different. Yeah. And every time I switched, I like put the brakes on stuff and turned a different direction, and then everything got jumbled. So it would be like, hey, pick one and stay with it.
And so the next question is, if you were starting over again today, would you still do Wedding Lovely, or would you go in a totally different direction?
I love Wedding Lovely. I'm not a weddings person. I like working with small businesses. I got married a few years ago, and I eloped in Vegas because I was like, I'm not going to deal with this wedding stuff. And I sent a message to the vendors I work with being like, oh, cool, I got married. Because again, the whole like being human with them. And a lot of them messaged me like, really? You eloped? Like I had this opportunity where I could have worked with the businesses. Yeah. I could have. A lot of wedding businesses do this, where they partner with their wedding businesses. They get a deep discount on services from these partner wedding businesses, because they turn it into this cupcake, beautiful affair. And then those images go onto wedding blogs, and then everyone gets the traffic from that. Mm-hmm. And I had this opportunity to not really exploit, but do that. No. My husband's wedding ring is actually a free wedding ring, wedding band. Like it was less than $100 worth. But I was interviewing this jeweler, and he's like, oh, cool, you can have this wedding band. Like, you're engaged. Here you go. I'm like, cool, free stuff.
Nice. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not a wedding person. I eloped. Being in the wedding industry has been very frustrating, because that customer acquisition year over year is such a weird business that I probably would choose something completely different. My life would be a lot simpler. But I'm here now, and I'm stubborn. So might as well just keep running it, even though, I'm not really running it right now. I have my minions.
Yeah, right on. Okay. Yeah. Well, so that's all I've got. Thanks for being on. This has been
Yay.
awesome. And I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of really interesting stuff in here, so it should be fun.
Awesome. I love talking about how much of not a huge success I am.
No, no, but it's so like it's so easy for people to get caught up on whether they're a relative success in the larger market, but like that's not to me that's not the point, right? It's getting people to have the confidence and be able to kind of set their expectations correctly to be ready to stick it out in the long run,
Yeah.
right? Because so many
And
people
yeah.
have outsized expectations and then they give up too soon or they never even start. And I think there's a lot to be said for helping people anticipate that pain and say, oh, wait, yeah, that's going to suck, but I can handle
Yeah.
that when I get there. Like,
Yeah.
things are going to go wrong. And the more we all learn from where we all went wrong, whether it was chasing an acquisition or whatever it was, then the next person to be like, all right, I know to be a little more skeptical now. And that
Yeah,
can make a
exactly.
world of difference because that next person now might say, you know what, I need this amount to even talk to you. And they're like, oh, well, yeah, we're not even going to come close to that. Cool. You just saved yourself a bunch of time. You can
Yeah.
focus on your product.
Yeah.
And so I think there's just too much hidden wisdom because we go through all these pains and we don't share them enough. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
that, and that's
And
good,
there's a lot of stuff you only learn when you go through it.
right?
I'll probably make the same mistakes again because it's, when you get that stars in your eye, everything, nothing can go wrong type feeling, then you just, it's hard to get over that feeling too.
Yeah, it really is. But hopefully this will help.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Of course.